friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin, and I am so excited that you decided to take time out of your day to spend with me, because today we are continuing some series. At one point I was doing these every month, but then I don't know what happened, but we need to make some progress in some series. So that is what we're going to be doing in this vlog. My first book I started in, well, actually, the first two books of these vlogs I started back in maybe March, April, and I had to wait for the audiobook to come back to me because my Libby hold expired. So we will be finishing Harrow the ninth in this vlog, and then we will also be finishing Fury Song in this as well, and of course tacking on a couple of new books so I can finish up some series, because it needs to happen. Because there are new series that I want to start, but I don't want to start them until I can free up some brain space of the current series that I'm in the middle of. It's just a never ending cycle. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, let's see what else I end up picking up. Hey friends, so I have finally finished Harrow the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir, and I am ready to talk about this. Okay, so in one of the vlogs I did last month, I don't even know which one, I mentioned that I was reading this and that I was very much confused. I did not understand what was going on. Look, I was just along for the ride, and I would like to say that got better or that changed, but if I'm being completely honest, it did not. It did not. One of the things that really confused me about this book, and that confused me about this series, is that each character has about 7 different names. And that alone can be confusing when you're trying to learn character names. Because just let's talk about Harrow. You have Harrow Hark known as Jemisin. You have Reverend Daughter. You have Harrow the First. You have a million different names for just one person. And by the time you think you have figured out who somebody is by one name, they're calling them by another name and you don't know who it is. And I'm just like, look. God was a character in this book, and he was called God, Emperor, Teacher, John. Who is all these people? In Tamsyn, why did you make an already confusing book more confusing by giving everybody 17 different names? 2 is enough. 2 would have been more than enough. Why we can't just have one name for everybody, you know? Yeah. So this definitely was more confusing to me than Gideon the Ninth was, because with Gideon we had like one overarching plot, and even though you might not have understood the science behind it or the technical terms, you basically could follow along with what was going on. And this one was not that way, but I also think it was that way because of what was happening to Harrow. Like, now that everything was explained at the end of the book, I have a more decent grasp on why things were the way they were, but it was just still very much unnecessarily confusing. And it was 75% into this book before everything began to make sense, before explanations were given and we were told why things were the way they were. And I'm like, look, you can see this is a very thick book. I think it's like 500 pages, I think, or something along those lines. And the font in this book is really small. So we're not just talking about like, 500 regular pages. Like, look at this font. So, with that being said, that is a very long time before you explain everything. 75% into any book is a long time before you explain what is going on. But, when that 75% came in, we had a little surprise. We had a change of POV. And when I tell you the last 25% of this book turned this around for me, it's so wild. I feel like the first 75% was one book, and then the last 25% was an entirely different book. And that is what I was expecting to read. That was what I was wanting to read. And it just irritated me that I had to read through so much of the book to get to the good part. And I think that, you know, there was a lot of twists, a lot of turns, a lot of information revealed that had you like, what? What? It was the last the last quarter of this book saved it for me completely. I rated it a 2.5 star, and when I tell you that that star and a half came from the last 25%, that's what happened. Because before then, I was like, look, no. And the way that this ended was so rude because you did it. There was no like closing of anything. Like, you don't know what has happened to the characters, where they are, what they are doing. It was very much an open-ended ending, which is so frustrating. But I had already planned on the reason why I was pushing through Harrow is because there's a little note. Is it at the end of this book? Yeah, so there's a little note at the very end of this book. When I say the very end, I mean like the last page after the glossary, after the acknowledgments, like the very end. And it tells you something about the third book. And I knew that I wanted to see what that was about. And that is the only reason why I pushed through Harrow, because I need to know what's gonna go down in this third book. I feel like it's going to be very good, hopefully, and we'll see. I also kind of knew going in that Harrow's book wasn't going to be like the best thing in the world to me, because when I was reading the first book, Harrow just wasn't a character that I was connecting with or that I even like cared about, honestly. So I knew that this was going to be a bit of a stretch for me anyway, but yeah. One question that I do have is that the third book is called Nona the Ninth. I don't know who Nona is. Nona was not introduced to us. Well, not by name anyway. We did meet a new character at the end of this book, and we didn't know their names. So I'm assuming that's gonna be Nona, but you never know with Tamsyn, honey. You just never really know what she's gonna do. So yeah, I am glad that I was able to read this, able to get through it. I wish it gave more. I wanted it to give more. I don't know when I'm going to read Nona. But yeah, ready to see what's going to happen. Yeah, this was a ride. This was a ride for sure. So yeah, 2.5 stars for Harrow the Night. Okay, y'all. So I didn't get a chance to talk to you midway through this book because it was surprisingly a quick read for me, which I can't say about the first two books in this series. But anyway, let's talk about The Stone Sky. I finished it. Was it this morning? Was it last night? One of those two. It got finished. And yeah, let's talk about it. So, The Stone Sky is the third and final book in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, which starts with the fifth season. So, in the fifth season, we're following Essen. I'm gonna say Essen probably, and Essen. I'm gonna say Essen, yeah. And we meet her on one of the worst days of her life. She comes home to find out that her husband has murdered their young son, who's like a baby, and has kidnapped their daughter, who is probably about 8 years old. And he has done this because he found out that the children are origins, and origins are essentially people with this weird type of earth magic. And for the people who don't have any magic, they are deathly afraid of the people who are origins, and they kill them off. They use them and or kill them off. And so Essence sets out to find her daughter and to find her husband to, handle business because he killed her son. And at the same time, the world is ending. Okay. So in this world, there are seasons, and these seasons basically wipe everything out. They're awful. They create conditions that are unlivable, and you basically have to hide out, and you never know how long these seasons are going to last. So most of the time, most of the population dies out. And so she's having to deal with all of this at one time. And so throughout the series, we go back in the past to learn more about Essen's childhood and, young adulthood, and how she ended up in the place that she was, and also learning the history about this world and how they have treated origins. And also, there's another type of being in this world as well, and how all of this kind of comes into play. And I feel like I'm doing a horrible job at explaining this, but I don't want to give too much away, because honestly, I did not know much going in when I read the fifth season, and I think that was the best experience for me. So yeah. So, with this being the final book of this series, I am going to, of course, not be able to tell you a whole lot about the plot and what happens, because I don't want to spoil it. But we're gonna talk about my feelings about what I read. And that's how we're gonna handle that. So in the Obelisk Gate, which is the second book, we met a character named Hoa. And let me tell you something about Hoa. He quickly and easily became one of my favorite characters in this book, mainly because Esun is a character and a person who has not had a lot of people truly care about her and want to protect her in her life. She's usually the one taking care of and protecting everybody else. And so to see Hoa come in and just be like, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to protect you, like, I was here for it. And I was happy that we got to learn a lot more about Hoa in this book, and see how he came to be who and what he is. And that was very interesting to me how that happened. And I was happy that we got some background on Hoa and his kind, because it was very much needed, in my opinion. And I was very interested to see the full circle that kind of happened with his storyline. I think I already said this, but this book felt like the easiest out of all three for me to read. And maybe it's because at this point you're established in the world, you are established with the characters, you know what most things are, you know the writing style, and how your brain is not working as hard because you're like in it at this point. And this one flew by, and it was a good thing, but I also feel like for a lot of this book, not a lot happened, or what was happening I didn't exactly have an opinion on. Both of those could be true, or it could be one of them. I don't know. I ended up rating this a 4.5 star, and I just feel like the second book was also a 4.5 star, but the fifth season was a full 5 star for me. And I just think that the other two books in the series, and more specifically, The Stone Sky, was not as explosive as, the fifth season was in terms of the information being revealed and how the plot was plotting. And, but again, I think that goes back to my previous point of knowing the world, and there's not much left for you to be surprised at. I don't know. I don't even know if any of that made sense, but I hope it did. And let me tell you about this ending. I spent, you spend the whole series wanting and hoping for Esun to find her daughter and for that what's the word, reunion, and to see it play out and to see it not be what I specifically wanted it to be was heartbreaking. And I'm like, girl, you didn't write this book, so why would the ending be what you wanted it to be? You didn't write it. The logic wasn't logicking, but the emotions were doing their thing. So yeah, I wanted this to end a certain way, and it didn't, and that didn't make me like it any less. Like, I completely knew how this was going to end, and I still was like, no, I want I want it how I want it, and that's not realistic, especially knowing the characters and knowing their story. Like, it ended how it was supposed to, and I'm gonna go ahead and give Lex her props because she's the one who kind of forced me into reading the fifth season. I had heard how great it was, but honestly, I had no intentions of picking the series up, and now it's one of my favorite of all time. And you know, she might know what she's talking about when it comes to books. She might know because it's probably going to forever be one of the most unique and yeah, it's probably going to be one of the most unique series that I will ever read. And for that, I am very grateful. So, yeah, done with the Stone Sky and the Broken Earth trilogy as well. Okay, friends, so I have finished Fury Song by. My throat just made a weird noise. So anyway, I have finished Fury Song by Rosaria Munda, and therefore that means that I have finished the Aurelian cycle, and I am ready to talk about my thoughts about this book. So when we start this, and of course, I'm not going to be able to say too much because it is the third book in a trilogy, and I don't want to spoil anything, but when we start this book, it feels like everybody is in some kind of precarious situation. Nobody is in a good place. Well, a few characters are in better places than they were, but nothing is just like great for anybody. So, one of our main characters, Lee, I just felt so I feel so bad for him because he has been pulled in every different direction, and no matter what decision he makes, it's going to negatively affect a large group of people. And that's hard, especially when reading this book or this series. It's kind of easy to forget that these are like very young adults, like, I think maybe um no more than 18 at the most. So like, these are essentially kids, in my opinion, who literally have the weight of their world on their shoulders, and they're trying to make these important decisions that will affect everyone around them, and that has to be hard. Like, I just can't even imagine. And then specifically with Lee, his choice involves his family, so that just adds another layer that makes everything difficult, and I just felt for him in so many ways. And there was an undercover mission within this book. And, I do not know how do you spend so much time with somebody and then they change a very small thing about themselves and you don't recognize them? Like, to me, it's the whole like Clark Kent and Superman thing. Like, he just put on some glasses. How do y'all not recognize who this man is? So it kind of reminded me of that. And I'm like, how did y'all not know that this was a person that y'all spent so much time with? Like, no, that's not real. And this book and this series, and why it took me so long to read it, is that there's just so much hurt all the way around. It's one of those things where you just want the best for the characters, and they're trying so hard to make everything right for everybody. But there's just so much sadness. There's so many bad things happening, so much injustice, and it just seems like there's no way out, there's no way around, but you just still have hope because that's really all they have left and it's all you have left. And like, look, and even though this was a YA series, I definitely feel like it tackled a lot of heavier topics, a lot of tougher topics, and like I mentioned, that made it easy to forget that these are not adults making these decisions and going through these things. And I don't know how I feel about that because these kids didn't get to be kids at all. And I just think that's so unfair. And then to go straight into trying to make decisions that will change the lives of everyone around them, like that's just so unfair to them to not be able to have, an actual childhood or like a teenage hood. It just sucked. It sucked that they weren't able to experience that. And when we got to the ending, there was something that I wanted to happen, and it was essentially an HEA. Sorry, y'all, got a phone call that I had to answer. So, what was I saying? Yeah, there was an ending that I wanted to happen, and it was essentially a happily ever after. But I knew just from reading the series that that was not going to happen. And I think I ended up preferring the more realistic ending that we got to this book versus the I just want everybody to be happy ending that I had in my brain. It still hurt, it's still bittersweet, but it was the ending that the characters would have picked for themselves. They did pick it for themselves, so you can't really fault that. But anyway, I rated this a 4 star. I just, this book hurt. There was something in this book that was so big and massive and heartbreaking. Like, I was sad. I was so sad, but everything came together. Everybody, ended up where they were supposed to be. I really like this series. If you feel like, because I know I mentioned last month that I feel like I was aging out of YA, this book does not fit into that category because it's older YA, but also like I said, the things that happen and the things that are discussed and all that, it just feels older in that way. And so yeah, 4 stars. So happy that I have finally finished the series. I feel like I have been reading this series for years at this point, and it's only 3 books, so whatever. But yeah, I definitely will be adding this to my list of recommendations because it was good. So if you're looking for something a little more on the serious side with a lot of political commentary and dragons, I think this is be for you. This will be for you. So yeah. Also, this one was a lot more romantic than the other 2 books. We had a few relationships going on in this book and got to like really get into it with them. And I actually, enjoyed that. So anyway, I'm done rambling now. Done with this. Okay, y'all, so it is time for us to wrap this video up. We are done continuing some series, okay? So we read Harrow the Ninth, and that was a 2.5 star. We finished Fury Song and the Aurelian Cycle series with a 4 star, and we finished The Stone Gate and the Broken Earth trilogy with a 4. No, that's not right. And we finished The Stone Sky and the Broken Earth trilogy with a 4.5. So overall, I feel like this was successful. We knocked off 2 series and we made progress in one. So yeah, I feel like we did pretty good. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, anything that you do to support me and my channel. It is very much appreciated. I hope that you have the best day that you possibly can. And remember to take care of yourself. And I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.